Okay, so here David plays g6, preparing to fianchetto his bishop to g7. And guys, this complete setup is known as the Slav defense Schlechter variation. And now Tal decides to take on d5 with c takes d5, and David recaptures with a c pawn, and now he develops his bishop to f4, eyeing on this strong diagonal. And David now develops his another knight, e3, bishop to g7, and you can see he is ready to castle. Okay, so bishop to e2 by Tal, and he wants to do the exact same thing on the other side. And after that, David finally decides to castle. But guys, there is a variation after bishop to e2 for black, which is knight to h5, which black can consider. Okay, so since this bishop is attacked, so let's suppose if bishop to e5, but now black can consider f6, attacking the bishop. So that's why bishop to g3. But after that, black can consider knight takes g3, h takes g3. And now you might be shocked that in this position, black can consider castling king side. But why? I mean, look at this rook on h file, which is directly eyeing the king side. Doesn't it look dangerous for black? Let's see. Okay, so to continue the attack, basically white has to first of all develop his queen. Let's suppose if this queen goes to c2, and yeah, queen to b3 was also possible, to create some pressure over the pawn, but black can easily defend with the move bishop to e6, which let's suppose if he plays, so that's why we have chosen this square, so that so basically which also eyes the king's side. Okay, so after bishop to e6, now if white continues the attack with castling queen side, so that he can double the rooks. But the point is this going to work? I mean, firstly black will play rook to c8, covering this important file, and if rook to h2, so that he can double the rooks, bishop to f5, attacking the queen. So that's why this queen has to move, but now a6, preparing to push this pawn. And if rook at t goes to h1, as I said, b5, which black can consider, attacking the queen. After queen to b3, knight to a5, attacking the queen again. And after this queen goes to a3, knight to c6. And if white decides to capture on h7, that will be a huge mistake because of b4. And suddenly you can see black is the one who is creating a more deadly attack. Okay, so after black castled, okay, so let me go back. Here Tal also decides to castle. And after that, knight to h5, going after that bishop. So that's why Tal brings it to e5, but f6. Okay, attacking the bishop, bishop to g3, knight takes g3, h takes g3. And suddenly you can see this variation looks like the previous one which I showed you, but now the difference is white king is now behind this amazing wall of pawns. Okay, so now bishop to e6 by black, strengthening the d5 pawn. Tal develops his queen to b3, eyeing that weak b7 pawn. So to defend this, knight to a5, targeting the queen as well as simultaneously guarding on b7. Queen to b4, bishop to f7, preparing to push his own center. Rook at f goes to e1 or d1, e6, okay, e4. Tal now attacks the d5 pawn, but rook to b8, which indicates a6 and then b5 is coming. So queen to a3, and you can see Tal is now preparing to push b4 so that he can attack this active knight. But b5, threatening to push b4, but before that Tal is the one who pushed b4, attacking the knight on so targeting the knight. So that's why knight to c4, attacking the queen. Queen takes a7, and now here black can consider rook to e8 so that he can bring this rook into this amazing e file. But instead he plays bishop to e8. The idea is to play rook to f7 so that he can target the queen. But the problem with that move is, firstly, Tal eliminates this active knight on c4 with bishop takes c4. And instead of recapturing, Here David tries to attack the queen on f7 with rook to f7, which is a mistake. And now it's better for Tal to consider queen to b6 so that he can target this weak pawn on e6. But Tal goes to a3. Okay, and after that b takes c4. Here black finally captures the bishop. E takes d5, e takes d5, and in the end you can see Tal is left with these amazing queenside pawns. And now he plays queen to b2, which indicates he wants to push his queenside pawns. g5, and you can see what David is preparing for. He wants to attack this knight, but before that Tal brings queen to d2. And as you can see, now he is eyeing the king side, but didn't he just hang the pawn on b4? I mean, now David instantly grabs the pawn on b4 with the rook takes b4, but that's an inaccuracy because this is what Tal wants. I mean, now he immediately captures the pawn on d5 with knight takes d5, and obviously queen takes knight is not possible due to this undefended rook. So that's why rook goes to b8, and now Tal smartly reroutes his knight to e3. And as you can see, this knight is now perfectly positioned to to attack the weak c4 pawn. So to defend this, David opts rook to c8, but rook at a goes to c1. Tal creates some pressure over the pawn. And David goes for rook at f goes to c7. He doubles the rook so that he can defend the pawn. And guys, now for white, can you guess the best move in this position? And guys, here the best move for white is to play d5, advancing the pawn as well as threatening the move d6 so that he can imbalance the defense of black pieces. And to stop this, if black opts for bishop to f8, now comes knight to d4, and you can see what's coming next. That's really amazing. But in the game, after rook at f goes to c7, here Tal goes for rook to c3. He just wants to double the rook so that he can create immense pressure on this pawn. So bishop to g6, but rook at d goes to c1. And you can see now Tal is maximizing the pressure on c4. So to defend this, bishop to f7, but d5. Tal simply blocks the diagonal of this bishop. And now tell me who is going to save this pawn. Okay, so now bishop to f8, and basically Tal wants to so basically David wants to play bishop to b4 so that he can attack these pieces, but a3. Tal stops him. Bishop to c5, attacking the knight on e3, but rook takes c4. Finally, Tal grabs the pawn on c4. And guys, now I just want you all to pause the video and just try to find the best move for black. And guys, here the best move for black is to consider the move bishop takes e3. And guys, can you guess the next move which white can play in this position? Okay, so one thing is clear, that queen takes e3 is losing because of rook takes c4, rook takes c4, rook takes c4, and you can see white will be a piece down. So that's why after bishop takes e3, here the best move for white is to consider the move rook takes c7, because if bishop takes queen, let's say bishop takes d2, rook takes c8, bishop takes c1, and finally rook takes d8 check. And you can see now this is completely losing for black. So that's why after rook takes c7, the only move is to grab the rook, queen takes e3. And although this position is completely winning for white, but there is a slight chance that black can hold this game. But in the actual game, after rook takes c4, in this position, here David makes a mistake with bishop takes a3, which allows Tal to simplify the position. And first of all, he exchanges the rook, and after that queen takes c7, and in the end you can see Tal is left with this passed d pawn, which is really strong, which is defended by the knight and the queen. So now he plays queen to d4. which is a gorgeous centralization, attacking the f6 and as well as preparing to jump this knight to f5. Here David, gives a check, but king to h2 and queen to b2, asking for queen exchange. But Tal can simply consider the move queen to d3 so that he can keep the pressure and try to just push his d pawn. But after queen to b2, he goes for queen to e4. And guys, that's a mistake, because by moving the queen to d4, Tal leaves the defense of the c5 square. And now black can take advantage of this with the move bishop to c5. And just take a look at the placement of this bishop. This bishop is eyeing the important d4 square, restricting the white pieces from entering, as well as also eyeing the d pawn so that it can't be pushed further. And but after queen to e4, here David plays bishop to f8. So basically he brings his bishop back so that he can eye on this pawn, as well as also stop this pawn from advancement. But knight to d4, centralizing the knight and looking at f5 and e6. Okay, so now black goes for h5 so that he can try to open the king. But it's now better for Tal to consider the move knight to e6, trying to eliminate this dark square bishop so that he can promote his own d pawn. But instead he made a mistake with knight at d goes to c2, and basically he does this so that black can't capture the f2 pawn. But the problem with that move is now black can consider the move queen to e5, which is a perfect outpost for the queen. And basically this queen on e5 is now like a savior, which is asking for a queen exchange as well as neutralizing all of the attack of white pieces. And let's suppose if this game continues like queen to d3, if white tries to declines the trade, but bishop to c5, covering the d4 square, as well as this bishop can eliminate so basically this bishop can eliminate this knight anytime if required. But in the game, after knight at d goes to c2, here David goes for queen to b7. He missed this opportunity, and Tal now brings his knight back to d4. And now bishop to c5 must be considered, but he creates another inaccuracy with queen to b2. And finally Tal finds the move knight to e6, attacking the bishop on f8 as well as looking at the passed pawn. I mean, that's amazing. And here David's now takes on f2, but knight to f5. What an attacking setup, guys. The knight are dominating on the board, and here David tries to open the king side with h4, but knight takes f8, king takes but before that h takes g3, king to h3, and after that queen to g1, threatening mate on h2. But simply king takes g3, Tal just grabs the pawn on g3, king takes f8, and in this position the final move by Tal is queen to e7 check. And in this position David Bronstein resigned. This is because, let's suppose, after king to g8, queen to d8 check, king to h7, queen takes f6, threatening mate on g7, as well as attacking the bishop on f7. And if black tries to give any check with the queen to e1, king to h2, and now you can see there is no way left for black to give some another checks, because this e5 square is already covered by the queen, as well as this h4 square is also covered by the knight. What an absolutely cinematic game by Tal. Like this video, and I will see you in the next one. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.